This conference will now be recorded.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Okay. Good morning, all. I'm starting the class now. Today's topic is abnormal uterine bleeding. Okay. So to say something is abnormal, we should know what is normal first. So we'll just quickly go through the normal menstrual cycle. Menstruation means periodic cyclical shedding of progestational endometrium accompanied by blood loss. It is regulated by HPO hormones secreted in pulsatile and cyclic pattern. Starts at menarche, that is 10 to 16 years, ends at menopause, that is 45 to 55 years, depending on their genetical makeup. The menopause might occur from 45 to 55 years. Each cycle, it might come for 24 days or 38 days. Anything between 24 and 38 is normal. Mean period is 28 days. Duration of the cycle is 2 to 8 days. Average bleeding is for 4 to 4.7 days. Blood loss is 20 to 80 ml. Average blood loss is 35 ml. These are the normal ranges. Outside this range, anything is abnormal. Coming to menstrual cycle, there are two cycles, that is ovarian cycle and endometrial cycle. Ovarian cycle consists of follicular phase and luteal phase. As we all know, luteal phase is a constant phase. In all ovulatory cycles, luteal phase is constant for 14 days. Follicular phase will be variable. Length of the cycle depends on the follicular phase of the cycle. Endometrial cycle is proliferative phase and secretory phase. Coming to normal control of menstrual bleeding. How will menstrual bleeding stops? These are the factors which contribute for stoppage of the menstrual bleeding. Platelet adhesion and formation of platelet plug with fibrin to seal the bleeding vessels. Coming to tissue repair, covers the raw area under the influence of EGF, and blood vessels regrow due to VEGF. These factors are under the control of estrogen. By the end of the menstrual cycle, bleeding stops by the effect of estrogen and by action of these factors. Thus, the raw area of the remaining basal endometrium is completely epithelialized under the estrogen effect. By the end of the menstrual cycle, estrogen levels tends to rise in the beginning of the next cycle. This will help in the stoppage of the menstrual bleeding. Localized vasoconstriction. This vasoconstriction is under the influence of prostaglandins. These are due to rise of PGF2 alpha by PGE2 ratio. This will promote the vasoconstriction and increased endothelin. This is also vasoconstrictor. By these factors, firstly due to platelet adhesion, and then by estrogen effect, and then by prostaglandins. These all together contributes for stoppage of the menstrual bleeding. In anovulatory cycles, which we generally call the DUB, dysfunctional uterine bleeding, there is decreased synthesis of PGF2 alpha and ratio of PGF2 alpha by PGE2 is low. Generally, this ratio should be high for the vasoconstriction. When this ratio is less, this will leads to DUB. In an anovulatory cycles, there is no ovulation, and these cycles are absolutely painless due to lack of prostaglandins. Coming to recommended normal limits of menstrual dimensions, we should know all the normal values. You should memorize all these normal ranges to say the menstrual cycle is abnormal. So coming to frequency, if the cycles are more frequent, the cycle should be occurring less than 24 days, and if they are less frequent, the cycle should occur more than 38 days. Anything between 24 and 38 days are normal. Coming to regularity of menses, cycle to cycle variation over 12 months. Regular variation is minus 20 to 12 plus 20 days. That means it can occur 2 days before or 20 days after the date of previous cycle, that is last LMB. This variation is normal. We can say the cycle is irregular if the variation is more than 20 days. Coming to duration of flow, prolonged flow is more than 8 days. Normal range is 4.5 to 8 days. Previously, we used to have the terminologies like polymenorrhea, oligomenorrhea, menorrhagia, metrorrhagia. These are the terminologies we usually follow in the previous days, but these are all outdated now. These are the accepted abbreviations describing menstrual symptoms. We should use only these symptoms while we are taking the history or anything. We should not use terminologies like polymenorrhea nowadays. That terminologies are all outdated. Accepted abbreviations are AUB, abnormal uterine bleeding, HMB. Previously, HMB we used to call like a menorrhagia. Now that terminology is outdated. HMB means heavy menstrual bleeding. HPMB, heavy and prolonged menstrual bleeding. IMB, this IMB we used to call metrorrhagia. That terminology is outdated, and we should call it as intermenstrual bleeding. And PMB, postmenopausal bleeding. These are the only terminologies that are approved to use nowadays. Coming to disturbances of heaviness of flow, heavy menstrual bleeding. This is excessive menstrual blood loss that interferes with women's physical, emotional, social, and maternal quality of life, and can occur alone or in combination with other symptoms. This definition is very important because the HMB is the most common symptom of menstrual disturbances we generally encounter in OPD. So you should by heart this definition. And heavy and prolonged menstrual bleeding. This is relatively less common than HMB. It is important to make a distinction from HMB given they may have different etiologies and respond to different treatments. We should be able to differentiate between heavy menstrual bleeding and heavy and prolonged menstrual bleeding. Coming to disturbances of the duration of flow, prolonged menstrual bleeding and shortened menstrual bleeding. Menstrual period exceeding 8 days in duration on a regular basis. So one menstrual cycle exceeding 8 days of period is we do not call prolonged menstrual bleeding. These exceeding the 8 days of duration, it should occur on regular basis. And coming to shortened menstrual bleeding is uncommon. Generally, we don't do this type of symptom in the OPD is very less. Defines as bleeding no longer than 2 days. Bleeding outside reproductive age. Generally, menstrual cycle related problems we generally encounter in reproductive age. It can also occur outside the reproductive age, which is abnormal. Coming to postmenopausal bleeding. Bleeding occurs more than 1 year after the acknowledgement of menopause. This is by definition. We call a woman attained menopause only after the amenorrhea for more than 1 year. So if the woman have amenorrhea for more than 1 year, we call that woman got menopause. And after attaining menopause, if a woman is having bleeding problems, then we'll call it as postmenopausal bleeding. Precocious menstruation, usually associated with other signs of precocious puberty, because we call it a precocious puberty only if menstruation occurs less than 9 years of the age. Coming to AUB, there are two types, acute and chronic. Acute AUB, an episode of bleeding in a woman of reproductive age who is not pregnant of sufficient quantity to require immediate intervention to prevent further blood loss. This is acute AUB, where you have to intervene immediately to prevent further blood loss. Coming to chronic AUB, bleeding from the uterine corpus that is abnormal uh, in duration, volume, and frequency, and has been present for majority of the last 6 months. If anything present any menstrual problem with which woman is presenting for more than 6 months, which is related to the bleeding, then we'll call it chronic AUB. Coming to causes of AUB, firstly general causes. General causes like blood dyscarrias, thyroid dysfunction, coagulopathy, genital TB. Then pelvic causes. Pelvic causes like PID, pelvic adhesions, uterine fibroids, endometrial hyperplasia, adenomyosis, feminizing tumors of the ovary, endometriosis, pelvic congestion, and varicose veins in the pelvis. These are relatively rare, that is varicose veins of the pelvis. Contraceptive use, IUCD and post-tubal sterilization. Finally, hormonal, which is among all these hormonal causes are more common. The hormone causes might be ovulatory, irregular ripening and irregular shedding, and anovulatory, resting endometrium. 80% of the times it is an ovulatory cause. And metropathia hemorrhagica, this we generally encounter in perimenopausal women. AUB does not include the bleeding caused by lesions in the lower genital tract. AUB by definition does not include the lesions in the lower genital tract. Functional uterine bleeding, we generally call it as DUB, abnormal bleeding from genital tract without any demonstrable organic cause. If there is no organic cause, by evaluating the patient of the AUB with AUB, we do not find any organic cause, then we categorize the AUB into the DUB. This is the functional cause, mostly due to hormones. Diagnosis made by excluding all the organic causes. This is due to altered HPO axis. It is mostly functional. Altered endometrial response to sex hormones, that is altered proportion of estrogen and progesterone production and their effect on the endometrial phasing leads to dysfunctional uterine bleeding. Coming to FIGO classification of AUB, this FIGO classification was done in 2011. This is very important for both theory and practical purposes. All of you should memorize this classification. This is a very easy classification, that is palm coin. You can memorize the classification by palm and the coin. Palm is structural causes of AUB, whereas coin is non-structural causes of AUB. Coming to palm, P for polyp, adenomyosis, leiomyoma, that is fibroids, M for malignancies or hyperplasia. These are structural causes. Coming to non-structural causes, coagulopathy, ovulatory dysfunction, endometrial causes, iatrogenic and not yet classified. Coming to polyp, abnormal vaginal bleeding is the most common presenting symptom. Accounts for all causes of abnormal vaginal bleeding in 39% of the premenopausal women and 21 to 28% in postmenopausal women. These polyps can occur in postmenopausal women also. Diagnosed by transvaginal ultrasonography or saline infusion sonography, and also hysteroscopy. Hysteroscopy is directly visualizing the endometrial cavity with a scope. So it is a confirmatory diagnosis when we visualize a polyp on hysteroscopy. Coming to adenomyosis, it is 70% of the women with adenomyosis have symptoms of AUB. 30% of the cases have dysmenorrhea. in adenomyosis, 30% of the women will not have any symptoms of bleeding. Their only complaint is severe dysmenorrhea at the time of cycles and also in between. Diagnosis is by ultrasound or MRI. MRI is confirmatory. As it is costly, we'll go by ultrasound. The category is subdivided depending on the depth of endometrial myometrial invasion. Coming to leiomyoma, that is fibroid uterus. Many leiomyomas are coincidental findings and are not cause of AUB. Most of the subserosal and intramural myomas will not cause any symptoms. They are just incidental findings on ultrasound, which is done for other causes. So the primary classification is presence or absence of leiomyoma as determined by ultrasound. In secondary classification, we have to distinguish myomas that involve the uterine cavity, the ones away from the endometrium. And tertiary classification involves submucosal growths, higher association of AUB with submucosal region compared to intramural and subserosal leiomyomas. Most of the cases, most symptomatic leiomyomas are submucosal lesions. Most of the subserous and intramural leiomyomas are asymptomatic. And the submucosal fibroids will be having symptoms like bleeding, which might present to us as AUB. Coming to malignancies, AUB is a primary symptom of endometrial neoplasia. 70% of postmenopausal women with AUB have benign findings. Only 15% have endometrial carcinomas. This group is rare in reproductive age, but may occur in women with PCOD and chronic anovulation. The diagnosis by histopathological examination of endometrium, that is DNC or biopsy, and by histoscopic biopsy. Always hysteroscopic biopsy is superior to DNC, as we can take the biopsy from abnormal area of endometrium under direct vision. So this includes both the malignant and pre-malignant lesions. Coming to non-structural causes, coagulopathy, it consists of spectrum of symptomatic disorders of hemostasis that can cause AUB in around 13 to 20% of the women in reproductive age. The most common cause is von Willebrand disease. Coming to ovulatory disorders, 80% are anovulatory cycles with unpredictable irregular menstrual cycles, some with heavy bleeding. So all of the ovulatory disorders, 80% are anovulatory, only 20% are ovulatory, but may be a consequence of luteal out of phase, that is loop events which with deficient progesterone. Some of these are caused by hypothyroidism and hyperprolactinemia. Coming to endometrial causes, usually have regular cycles, normal ovulation, and no definable cause of AUB. These endometrial causes of AUB have regular cycles and normal ovulation, usually present with heavy menstrual bleeding, which may indicate a disorder of endometrial hemostasis. This is always a problem of hemostasis. Others may present with heavy menstrual bleeding or intermenstrual bleeding, which may be secondary to infection or inflammation. Coming to iatrogenic causes, this is caused by steroidal hormones administered as contraceptive. Especially in low dose IUCD, copper T may cause unscheduled breakthrough bleeding, that is intermenstrual bleeding. The drugs that are responsible are anticoagulants, phenothiazines, and tricyclic antidepressants, which affect dopamine metabolism. These are the drug interactions which cause intermenstrual bleeding. Not classified. This is rare causes, not well defined or diagnosed, or are in arteriovenous malformations. These are very rare diagnoses. If we rule out all other causes, we have ruled out functional causes also. If the bleeding is not controlled with hormonal pills also, then we'll diagnose it as not classified AUB. That might be arteriovenous malformations or varicose veins of uterine vessels or myohyperplasia. In others, no cause is found out by existing investigations. They are clubbed into this group. If we do all the investigations we have and we do not find any cause, then mostly we'll treat it as a functional cause. If the bleeding is not stopped with hormone pills or any non-hormone pills also, then we'll classify this as a not classified AUB. Then we should go for diagnosing arteriovenous malformations with Doppler studies or varicose veins and myohyperplasia. Coming to AUB of anovulatory causes, we all know puberty menorrhagia and causes are blood dyskaryosis, that is coagulation disorders, thrombocytopenia purpura, von Willebrand disease, leukemias. This all accounts for 20% of the cases. Hypothyroidism accounts for 4%, PCOD 10 to 12%, genital tuberculosis 4%, liver disorders, feminizing tumor, ovarian tumors, that is granulosa cell tumors or theca cell tumors, adrenal hyperplasia. Coming to cystic glandular hyperplasia, this is also known as metropetica hemorrhagica. This is the condition we generally see in premenopausal women. The basic fault may lie in ovaries or may be due to disturbance of rhythmic secretions of gonadotropins. Generally, we see this in premenopausal women. There is slow increase in secretion of estrogen, but no negative feedback in inhibition of FSH. Gradual rise in levels of estrogen with concomitant phase of amenorrhea for 6 to 8 weeks. As there is no ovulation, the endometrium is under the influence of only estrogen without being exposed by growth limiting hormone like progesterone for prolonged period, that is 6 to 8 weeks. Cause of bleeding out, the estrogen levels falls resulting in endometrial shedding. Endometrial growth has outgrown their blood supply. Bleeding is heavy and there is no vasoconstrictor effect of TGF2 alpha. Bleeding is prolonged until the endometrium and blood vessels regenerate to control it. When we see microscopically, generally in premenopausal women, when we see heavy menstrual bleeding, we generally do DNC. In this histopathological examination, we'll see there's marked hyperplasia of all endometrial components, absent of secretory changes, and areas of necrosis in the superficial layers of which with small hemorrhages and leukocytic infiltrations. This is microscopic picture of metropetica hemorrhagica. Coming to changes in the ovary, cystic changes may be observed involving one or both ovaries. The cyst may be single or multiple and fluid contains estrogen. The cyst is follicular type. There is no evidence of corpus luteum. Coming to differential diagnosis, confused with disturbed uterine pregnancy or ectopic gestation. In anovulatory DUB, there is decreased incidence of PGF2 alpha and the ratio of PGF2 alpha by PGE2 is low. Due to this reason, DUB of this type is absolutely painless. All anovulatory AUBs, which we call as DUBs, are painless due to lack of prostaglandins. Coming to ovulatory AUB, these are two types: irregular shedding and irregular ripening. Coming to irregular shedding of endometrium, that is Halban's disease. The possible explanation is incomplete withdrawal of luteinizing hormone even on 26th day of cycle. This leads to incomplete atrophy of corpus luteum, which in turn leads to persistent secretion of progesterone. The menstruation comes on time, but due to persistent secretion of progesterone, there is prolonged bleeding, but the bleeding is never heavy. Endometrial sampling performed after 5th to 6th day of the onset of menstruation reveals mixture of secretory and proliferatory endometrium. Coming to irregular ripening of endometrium, this is poor formation of inadequate function of corpus luteum. Secretion of both estrogen and progesterone is inadequate to support endometrial growth. As such, slight bleeding occurs and continue prior to the start of the proper flow. The endocrine profile in the luteal phase shows persistent flow of urinary pregnenolone and levels and less than 3 mg or plasma progesterone levels less than 5 nanogram per milliliter. Endometrial study prior to or soon after spotting reveals patchy area of secretory changes with proliferative endometrium. These are two types: irregular shedding and irregular ripening. These are ovulatory AUBs. Coming to diagnosis of AUB, first we have to take detailed history to know the cause of AUB. First we'll go for menstrual history, medical history, age of menarche and menopause, menstrual bleeding patterns, severity of bleeding, pain during the bleeding, pain during the cycle, and medical conditions, surgical history, use of medications to know the any drug interactions, symptoms and signs of possible hemostatic disorders, history of epistaxis, gum bleeding, and abnormal bleeding. Generally, we ask for these symptoms in a reproductive age woman. Physical examination, general examination, and pelvic examination. In pelvic examination, we'll see for external and speculum examination of genitalia with pap test if needed, and bimanual examination. Diagnostic evaluation of AUB. Laboratory tests, we should do pregnancy test first. In all cases of AUB and delayed menstrual cycle or anything, first we have to rule out the pregnancy. That is UPT mostly. Complete blood counts, TSH, target screening for blood disorders when indicated on the based on history. If there is any bleeding disorders, we should go for targeted screening for blood disorders. We generally do not do these tests routinely. That is bleeding time and clotting time, platelet count, and PT-APTT. Specific test for von Willebrand disease. If there is any family history and bleeding disorders, then we'll go for firstly these platelet count and PT-APTT, BTCT. If we found any positive findings in this, then we'll go for specific test for von Willebrand disease. Coming to imaging studies, ultrasound and color Doppler findings of endometrial hyperplasia or endometrial thickness more than 12 mm. This is hyperplasia of endometrium, hyperechoic and regular outline, angiogenesis and neovascular signal studies. Coming to TVS is also very sensitive to detect any anatomical abnormalities, that is fibroid adenomyosis or polyp of the uterus and endometrium and adnexia. Coming to saline infusion sonography to diagnose endometrial polyps, submucous fibroids and uterine abnormalities. Saline infusion sonography is very helpful as we can distinguishly outline the polyp or submucous fibroids clearly on saline infusion sonography, and we can make out septum or subseptate uterus on this. Coming to histoscopy, for better evaluation of endometrial regions, to take biopsy from the offending site under direct vision. This is most diagnostic gold standard for intrauterine lesions like polyp and submucosal fibroids. The frequent findings of polyp and submucous fibroids are often missed by blind curettes. When we do DNC, we often sometimes miss these findings as we cannot see the endometrium clearly. This is a blind procedure. When we go for histoscopic biopsy, we can clearly see all these lesions in the uterus. Finally, laparoscopy to exclude unsuspected pelvic pathologies like endometriosis, PID, and ovarian tumors. Generally, we go for laparoscopy. Finally, endometrial sampling. It can be done as an outpatient basis with Pipille sampler. This is a very simple procedure. We can do on outpatient OPD basis. As it is a blind procedure, intrauterine pathologies cannot be detected. As we do this procedure blindly, some intrauterine pathologies we cannot detect. Diagnostic uterine curettes, that is DNC, to exclude the organic lesions in the endometrium, that is incomplete abortion, endometrial polyp, tubercular endometriosis, and or endometrial carcinoma, to detect the functional state of the endometrium, to have incidental therapeutic benefit, We can also have therapeutic benefit by DNC. In a adolescent, DUB is rarely needed. We generally do not do DNC in adolescent women. During childbirth, childbearing period, that is 20 to 40 years, it should be done if the bleeding is acyclic. If the bleeding is cyclic, we generally don't go for DNC. During perimenopausal loop period, diagnostic curettage is mandatory prior to any therapy to exclude endometrial malignancy. Before the any treatment procedure, we should compulsory do this DNC for perimenopausal women to exclude malignancies. Time schedule for uterine curettage. If the bleeding is cyclical and the complaint is menorrhagia, we'll generally do it on 5 to 6 days prior to the period. If the complaint is irregular shedding, 5 to 6 days after the period starts, if the history indicates it is irregular ripening, soon after the period starts, we should do the DNC. If the periods are acyclic, soon after the period starts, we should do the DNC. If the bleeding is continuous, we can do a DNC at any time. Coming to management. So we should decide the goals of management of AUB, confirm the diagnosis of AUB first, and prevent short and long-term complications, that is acute or chronic anemia, long-term consequence of an ovulation, and return to a pattern of normal menstrual cycles, prevention of recurrence. These are our goals before treating a patient, and the choice of the management depends on age of the patient. Any treatment we give for AUB, age of the patient is very, very, very important, and past history and bleeding amount. Management of AUB. Firstly, we go for general measures. Medical management with non-hormonal, hormonal and hormonal pills. Surgical management. In surgical management, we have minimally invasive or conservative procedures and radical. Radical is always hysterectomy. General measures. First, we will advise rest, assurance, and sympathetic handling. These general measures are mostly applicable for adolescent girls. And anemia should be corrected by diet, hematinics, and blood transfusion. Clinically evident systemic or endometrial abnormalities should be investigated and treated accordingly. Coming to options for management of AUB, we have two options: medical therapy and surgical care. In medical therapy, we have hormonal therapy, oral contraceptives, estrogen and progestins, hemostatic agents, these are non-hormonal, and NSAIDs. Surgical care, we have DNC, endometrial ablation, and hysterectomy. DNC and endometrial ablations are conservative measures, whereas hysterectomy is a radical method. Most cases of DUB can be treated medically. Most of the cases of DUB, we can treat them medically. Surgical measures are reserved for situations when medical therapy has failed and is contraindication. If there is any contraindicated indication for hormonal pills, we generally go for surgical measures as first line of management. Coming to non-hormonal management, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, that is NSAIDs. There is evidence that prostaglandin E components are increased in menorrhagia. The drugs inhibit cyclooxygenase and prostaglandin production. Mefenamic acid, 250 to 500 mg TID, reduces menstrual blood flow by 20 to 50% in 70% of the patients. Ovulatory cycles, these are mostly used in ovulatory cycles where we have dysmenorrhea, post-IUCD insertion, and post-sterilization menorrhagia. These NSAIDs are mostly effective in these conditions. Coming to non-hormonal management, antifibrinolytic agents. Generally, we use this, most commonly used is tranexamic acid for 3 to 6 days orally. This is effective that 50% of the cases, in 50% of the cases, it counteracts the endometrial fibrinolytic system. This may be tried when estrogen and progesterone are contraindicated or unsatisfactory. We should keep in mind that although history of thromboembolism is contraindicated for this use, if the patient is having a DVT or any thromboembolic events in his past history, tranexamic acid is highly contraindicated. Non-hormonal management, other one is ethamslate, reduce capillary facility and inhibitory effect on prostaglandins. 500 mg 4 times a day for 5 days. From 5 days prior to anticipated period up to 10 days reduces the menorrhagia by 50% in ovulatory cycles. And the next one is desmopressin. This is synthetic analog of arginine vasopressin indicated in the cases of von Willebrand diseases and factor VIII deficiency. It is generally given IV or intranasally. Coming to hormonal therapy. Hormonal therapy, we have progestrogens, combined oral contraceptives, estrogen, gestinon, danazol, GnRH analogs, and selective estrogen receptor modulators. Progestrogens, these are main hormones used in AUB. The common preparation used are norethistron acetate or medroxyprogesterone acetate. The high initial dose of 10 to 30 mg a day should arrest the bleeding in 24 to 48 hours. And after we use 5 mg daily for 20 days. If there is a heavy menstrual bleeding, first we have to go for higher doses of progestrogens. Then we'll give maintenance dose for 20 days. Withdrawal bleeding is expected, but the bleeding is very less. The procedure, this procedure we generally call as medical curettage. We have cyclical therapy, that is 5th day to 25th day. In anovulatory bleeding, we will go for 5th day to 25th day. Cyclic progesterone preparations of medroxyprogesterone acetate 10 mg or norethistron 5 mg will give for 5th day to 25th day of cycles for 3 cycles. In a ovulatory cycle, low dose combined pills are useful for 3 cycles. Another cyclical therapy is 15th to 25th day. This 10 day cycle will generally give for ovulatory cycles, where the patient wants pregnancy or in cases of irregular shedding or irregular ripening. Coming to continuous progesterones, this is in this we'll give these progesterones continuously for 3 months, and we'll give the gap so that the patient is having cycle for menstrual cycle bleeding for every 3 months. This inhibits pituitary gonadotropin secretion and ovarian hormone production. MPA 10 mg thrice daily is given, and treatment is usually continued for at least 90 days. 3 monthly is also now recommended to decrease number of menstrual cycles. Other hormonal therapies, estrogen. In situations where bleeding is acute and severe, conjugated estrogen of 25 mg is given IV. Mechanism of action is it helps the rapid growth of denuded endometrium and promotes platelet adhesions, increase in levels of fibrinogen and factor 5 and 10 and platelet aggregation. It controls bleeding by process of healing. Doses it may be repeated every 4th hourly till the bleeding is controlled, then oral therapy is started. Coming to danazol, it is generally given 200 to 400 mg daily in 4 divided doses for 12 weeks. Reduces the blood loss by 50%. It is suitable in cases with recurrent symptoms and in patient waiting for hysterectomy. The effect is relatively short-lived, so we generally do not give danazol for longer periods. Generally, we'll give this to stop bleeding before hysterectomy. Generally, danazol is avoided because of this non-accepting side effects like virilizing effects. Gestinon, it has anti-estrogenic, anti-progestational, and some androgenic activity. It is administered in dose of 2.5 mg twice weekly or 5 mg vaginal tablets thrice weekly for 12 weeks. This danazol and gestinon is less used because of the virilizing side effects they have. Coming to GnRH agonist, used to decrease size of leiomyomas, but can be used for AUB as well. Euprolide depot injections 3.75 mg given monthly for 4 to 6 months. They have a disadvantage like initial flare up. This is not acceptable in case of AUB. where patient is having a heavy menstrual bleeding. Initially, these will cause initial flare-ups and menopausal symptoms and osteoporosis. As they are having anti-estrogenic effects, osteoporosis is the main side effect, and this can be counteracted by add-back therapy by giving 5 to 10 mg norethisterone. GnRH analogs take 4 weeks to act, and there is therefore not effective in acute episodes of bleeding. The anazole gastrinone and the GnRH agonists are generally used as second-line therapy because of these side effects and disadvantages they have. We generally do not use this for first-line therapy. And selective estrogen receptor modulators, the new drug known as ormeloxifene or ormeloxifene, non-hormonal like centroman 60 mg twice weekly for 12 weeks for 6 months, 12 weeks to 6 months, and thereafter weekly is 50% effective. Advantage, sir, it is not having it do not have breast or uterine cancer because of its anti-estrogenic effect. It is also agonist to cardiovascular system and bone protection. These drugs do not cause osteoporosis. Coming to mifepristone, it is an anti-progesterone. It inhibits ovulation and induces amenorrhea, and it also reduces size of the myoma, that is fibroid. Clomiphene is advocated if pregnancy is desired by the patient. Seasonal, it is also a new drug. Combined estrogen and progesterone. When estrogen is not contraindicated and women also needs contraception, we generally give this drug. It is used daily for 84 days and will give a gap of 6 days. This means the patient will get period for every 3 months. Menstruation occurs during this tablet-free period. It is welcomed by women because of its infrequent periods. Coming to Mirena, it is very effective method, LNG IUS. To avoid side effects of hormonal therapy, Mirena IUCD is now employed to control menorrhagia. It directly suppresses endometrium with minimal side effects. It is also known as medical hysterectomy. If you use progestins for higher doses initially and then give for maintenance doses, then that we called as medical curettage. This Mirena IUCD insertion we call as medical hysterectomy. It has no action on ovaries, therefore E2 and progesterone levels remain normal. About 25% of the women become amenorrheic at the end of 1 year. It is recommended as first-line therapy for women with HMB in the absence of any structural or histological abnormalities. We should not give this Mirena IUCD if there are any structural or histological abnormalities. It contains 52 mg of levonorgestrel. It releases 20 mcg micrograms per 1 day, and it is effective for 5 years. Advantages are a quick return of fertility is noted following its removal. Mirena is also useful in women with menorrhagia and dysmenorrhea associated with uterine fibroids and adenomyosis. It is effective for 5 years. This is relatively long-acting. Disadvantages of Mirena are slightly difficult to insert, takes 3 months before it becomes effective. Amenorrhea occurs in 20 to 25% cases, which is not desirable in younger age of women. Ectopic pregnancy is reported in 0.2% of women. Hysterectomy is required in 25% by the end of 3 years because of recurrence of menorrhagia. Coming to surgical management, surgical methods are uterine curettage and ablative techniques. Uterine curettage, it is done predominantly as a diagnostic tool for elderly women, but at times it has hemostatic and therapeutic effects by removing the necrosed and unhealthy endometrium. So coming to the ablative techniques, fertility is not possible following ablative therapy. If you want to do ablative techniques, the woman should complete the family first and then go for ablative techniques. The method should destroy 2 to 3 mm of myometrium if recurrence of menorrhagia has to avoided. If we have to avoid the recurrence, This treatment, this ablative technique should destroy 2 to 3 mm of myometry. These have two generations: first generation ablative techniques and second generation. First generation is endometrial resection, roller ball ablation, laser ablation. Second generation of cryoablation, thermal ball ablation, radio frequency ablation, and microwave ablation, diode laser uh, techniques. Coming to indications and contraindications. Indications: AUB is not responding to medical treatment, then we'll go for ablative techniques. Childbearing age is completed, not preferring for hysterectomy. Medical problems which prevents hysterectomy. There are any medical contraindications for hysterectomy, then we'll go for ablative techniques. Contraindications are endometrial cancers, not completed family or pregnant, severe vaginal or cervical infections, PID, IUCD, and abnormal structures or shape of the uterus. Then hysteroscopic endometrial ablation, transcervical resection of endometrium under general anesthesia using roller bore or loop through hysteroscope, destroys 4 to 5 mm of endometrium and forms uterine synechiae. So this is the hysteroscope. By this we can directly see the endometrium. We can see this heat from laser destroys uterine lining. We can see this lining, lines formed by the laser. This part of the endometrium is removed by a laser. This is the hysteroscope. This is the surgeon's view. From here, surgeon can view this field. At the end of the hysteroscope, we'll be having hot fine wire loop which strips away the endometrium. And we can also have a roller ball. This ball will be heated and it will destroy the uterine line. Through the hysteroscope, we can use a wire or a ball. Coming to summary of the DUB management. DUB management is always depends on the age of the patient. Age of the patient is extremely important to treat a patient of DUB. If we divide the age groups into 3 groups: adolescent, reproductive age group, and perimenopausal age group. In adolescents, we generally do abdominal ultrasound to rule out any organic causes, and endometrium sample is very rarely done. Generally, medical management will generally suffice. We not at all do a surgery for adolescent age group. Coming to reproductive age group, we frequently will do abdominal or transvaginal sonography. Endometrial sampling may be required as per a TVS report. Generally, medical management is the first line of the management, and if we cannot control the bleeding or control the symptoms by medical therapy, then we'll go for surgery. Surgical management is always second line. In perimenopausal women, we generally do abdominal and transvaginal sonography. Endometrial sampling, we should not do endometrial sampling. We should always do endometrial sampling before proceeding for any treatment, because first of all we should exclude the cancers in this age group. So endometrial sampling should be always done. Medical management, mostly first line of the treatment. Sometimes surgical management might also be the first line of the management. This is how we treat a patient of DUB. Age of the patient is very important to treat a patient. Thank you. Any doubts in the topic? Only 120 members attended the class. Can anyone answer? Okay, thank you.